Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to today's webinar. The theme for today's session is the rule of three. Just as living organisms have a reasonably standard pattern of growth and development, so do competitive markets. And Dr. Sheth's research into approximately 200 industries has revealed that markets evolve in a highly predictable fashion, governed by the rule of three. It is an honor to host the authority in this domain of competitive markets, Dr. Jagdish and Sheth. As part of NDIM leadership responsibility in education and knowledge enhancement, being India's first and the only business school declared as a mentor institute by the Government of India and the CII, we are here with Dr. Jagdish Sheth to delve into the rule of three, competitive positioning, and understand how competition creates major and niche competitors. NDIM is a 28-year-old nationally and internationally accredited MBA college declared as the best industry-linked B School of India for 3 years in a row, 2017, 2018, and 2019, by the AICTE, Ministry of HRD, and the CII. NDIM has also been declared as the best B School in North India and the best B School with placement services by the Associated Chambers of Commerce and Industry from 2017 to 2020. Let me introduce our eminent speaker for today's webinar. Dr. Jagdish Sheth is the Charles H. Kellstadt Professor of Business in the Goizueta Business School at Emory University, USA. He is globally known for his scholarly contributions in consumer behavior, relationship marketing, competitive strategy, and geopolitical analysis. Professor Sheth has over 50 years of combined experience in teaching and research at the University of Southern California, the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, Columbia University, MIT, and Emory University. He is the recipient of all four top awards given by the American Marketing Association. That is the Richard D. Irwin Distinguished Marketing Educator Award, the Charles Coolidge Parlin Award for Market Research, the P.D. Converse Award for Outstanding Contributions to Theory in Marketing, and the William Wilkie Award for Marketing for a Better Society. Professor Sheth has authored and co-authored more than 300 papers and several books, including Clients for Life, The Rule of Three, Tectonic Shift, Self-Destructive Habits of Good Companies, Chindia Rising, The Four A's of Marketing, Firms of Endearment, Breakout Strategies for Emerging Markets, The Sustainability Edge, and Genes, Climate, and Consumption Culture, Connecting the Dots. Dr. Sheth has been conferred Padma Bhushan by the President of India on the Republic Day this year. The award is India's highest civilian award for non-resident Indians for literature and education. Dr. Sheth has received the Padma Bhushan Award in recognition of his contribution to academia, industry, government, and communities around the world. We are happy to share that today's event is supported by PhD CCI, ASSOCHAM, Daikin Air Conditioning, CEGR, and Sri Sri University. Today's session host is Dr. V.M. Bansal, Chairman NDIM. He is a former civil servant and has been the youngest and the longest serving Secretary, Collector, Commissioner, Principal Commissioner, and Director of the country's biggest statutory urban authority, DDA Government of India, for 28 years. He has headed several public sector undertakings and has been behind the success of biggest national and international events, starting with Asiad in 1982, CHOGM, and Commonwealth Games in 2010. He is a special invitee to the Committees on Higher Education of both FICCI and CII, and the chairman of PhD CCI Committee on Education. Now I invite Dr. Bansal to take the proceedings forward.
Thank you so much, Ankur, and I can't be more happy than welcoming one of the greatest academic leaders of our times and of our country. And during discussions with him yesterday and for a little while today, the feeling that one gets is of tremendous spirit of Indianness, the nationalism, and very, very keen desire to pay back to the nation. So we'll be very keen and we'll be possibly able to live up to his expectations to take his dream forward, because New Delhi Institute of Management was also set up by a freedom fighter only with the sole intention of paying back to the nation. So for 28 years, otherwise no union cabinet minister would sit in the board meetings of an MBA college. For 5 years, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, being the very important minister of the government of India, sat with me in all the board meetings despite being the union cabinet minister. So I'm sure we'll have a lot of opportunity to work and support the dreams of Dr. Sheth in India and if need be overseas also. We have the capability. Government of India since 2017 has been declaring us best under 19 parameters. So it's a great honor and I'm sure we'll be able to live up to Dr. Sheth's vision and his expectations. And to all the friends who are attending today's webinar, we have been selected now 4th time this year for the Smart India Hackathon of the Government of India, which is a dream of our Prime Minister. Our Honorable Prime Minister very proudly mentioned about Smart India Hackathon at Howdy Modi last year in USA.
Right.
In this part of the country, we are the only MBA college given this honor because we are deemed to be, perhaps deemed to be, I wouldn't say anything, to be best for artificial intelligence, for digital, for data analytics, for data science, for business analytics, all those fields. And that is what is the government of India saying. We are not saying anything for this at all, especially because this year the Smart India Hackathon is online. All participants across the country would be finding solutions online and we have to set up very big systems to be monitoring them all the time. So Government of India found us worth it. All other are big engineering universities. There's no other MBA college given this responsibility. So you really feel very happy about it. And although Ankur has already mentioned, but I thank SOCM, the PhD Chamber of Commerce, CEGR, DICAN, in fact, most of their presidents, their senior most management is present here today. My friend CMD of DICAN, Mr. Java, is present here today. And I would just like to tell Dr. Sheth that the CEOs, the CMDs, the presidents, the founders of whatever industry he may be thinking, they're all present here today. And very senior professors and directors and deans from almost every IIM of the country and every IIT of the country are also present here today. My senior colleagues and friends, presidents of the Rotary Clubs of Delhi and of the country, very senior doctors, founders of very cancer hospitals in the country, they're also present here today, along with, of course, academia and students from India and overseas. And also because Rajita is present here, already she got introduced. So Sri Sri University, as I mentioned, along with other things, they are two are partner with us. And Rajita has been one of the top 100 most influential women of India. And she's heading the Sri Sri University, which is based on, spiritualism ethos set up by Sri Sri Guruji. We call him Guruji. We generally try not to take his name. So they are part of us today. We have a lot of blessings from him all the time. And one final word before I pass on the mentor to today's esteemed speaker. Seeing the kind of people who are attending today's webinar, my two small requests. One request to the academia across the country who are attending, that, we are very keen to take your activities, your dreams forward sitting in Delhi, and especially me chairing the education committee of the PhD chamber. So I request all the academia across the country that let us work together for creating better training environment, better consulting environment, pooling our best practices. Today's new education policy has come. Again, that will remain a policy. So new best practices that each one of you has, let us pool. Please write to me. And I would love to be the nodal person as chairman of the NDIM and chairman of the PhD Chamber of Commerce Committee also. And same request to the industry. Such senior people attending here today. I think there's a responsibility on each one of you to please connect with us, because I'm also on the Government of India's senior most committee on internships for the country. I'm the only one out of all the MBA colleges in the country doing that thing. So I would like to take your strength, your sources for the benefit of the masses. So please connect with us. We want to learn from each other. And already, thank you very, very much. All the partners they have associated with us today. I'm extremely grateful. And I now request Professor Dr. Jagdish Sheth to kindly guide us into the future.
Thank you so much for such a nice introduction. And I'm so pleased to be invited by NDIM and by Sri Sri University along with other hosts. It's my pleasure to be there. I left India in 1961, like anybody else, as a foreign graduate student, became a professor in 1963 at Columbia University. So what I saw India at that time and what India is today is remarkably different. In my generation, there was no competition. We had basically what we'll call a licensed Raj. How much can you use the national resources to produce and consume less, surprisingly, rather than the other way around? In my generation, we did not have landline telephones. Today, we have cellular telephones, one of the largest markets in the world. In my generation, we had to wait 7 years or so to get a scooter like a Vespa or Bajaj or whatever the brand names is. Today, I can get scooters of so many brands. There were only 2 cars available at that time, both state enterprises. One was state enterprise at least, which was the ambassador car, private, but it's basically blessed by the government. And that was a one sedan for family. Great car, by the way, for its time, it was very good. And of course, Fiat was the other one, which was a license given by Fiat from Italy to India to produce those cars, which are used mostly for taxis. The world has changed enormously. My interest in competition began in the early 70s. There was a large-scale study done in the US where they talked about how larger the market share, greater the profitability. There's a financial reward that market gives you through competition, especially through dominance of the market by 2 or 3 players. I liked it and I didn't like it. I felt like there was also a presence of very strong niche players who did not aspire to have a market share, but they offer something unique, different, and commanded a premium in the marketplace. In economics, we have 2 different theories. The theory of oligopoly, which is a few companies controlling the market, 60, 70, 80, 90%, no monopoly. And you have the monopolistic competition, as it is called, where you have lots of small players, but each one commanding a premium in the market by offering something innovative or differentiation. Economists never thought that every market is a combination of both. And this was a major revolution. And that is the way I began to work in this area from 1971. I have 2 great colleagues. My first colleague is Raj Sisodia, who and I wrote the first book called The Rule of 3, and it became very popular. I have a second book coming out with another co-author, John Usle. Myself, John Usle, and Raj have written now a revised book, which will come out probably in December, called The Global Rule of 3. And this is very important for us to understand. While I said the foundation for the theory, the globalization of competition will be here if there is no globalization of markets. Today, if you look at India, competition is from everywhere. In the appliances industry, you have the dominant players like LG and of course Samsung and Whirlpool from India, from America. You see very similarly in the cell phone industry, all the competitors are both domestic and foreign. So a competition we need to understand and what strategies one can have to compete successfully. And that is the theme I'll talk about pretty much and use as many examples out of India as possible. And before I start formal presentation, let me make one more comment. India, when you analyze the data, has the size, but no scale. And of course, the theories in competition, you will talk about scale economies. Do you have a scale to make it? in some fashion? Do you have a cost efficiency? Do you have the Model T Henry Ford example, making more automobiles on assembly than building one car at a time? You have a scale. In India, what we have is size, but no scale. We are just too many players, each one regionally dominating, each one has a limited capacity, limited market, and therefore globally they do not look very big. The only exceptions probably are, for example, the cellular telephone industry, where companies like Airtel are all over the world dominating. They're like number 2. Reliance Jio will come probably number 2, number 1. We have done something similar in the energy business, but it's more on the domestic market as much as the global market. So we'll talk about globalization of the Indian enterprises worldwide, where they're going, where they have a competitive advantage. This is the background, and I will go through the formal presentation now. So I will ask Tina Singh to please show my slides. So the title of the presentation is The Rule of 3, Competitive Positioning. How do you compete by positioning yourself right? At the upper right, you see the logo of the book that came out, which became enormously successful in terms of its impact, especially for mergers and acquisition people, like a Goldman Sachs, etc., sell side primarily. And it became very popular in the strategy literature, especially in management strategy side. In marketing, it had a secondary impact, not as strongly as it'll be in the strategy area. So how does competition look like? Is there a visual representation of competition? And my aha moment came in by doing research on shopping centers. So if you take the next slide, please, slide number 3. All markets look like a shopping center. So can we learn from shopping center what are the characteristics of the markets? What you find that typically a shopping center would have, enclosed shopping center primarily, 3 anchor stores. And usually it is only 3. The 4th one does not survive, and 2 is not enough. There's something about the rule of 3 that has emerged, why we put the title of the book called The Rule of 3. They are full line generalists, which means anything you want, they're like department stores. And right next to them are specialty stores, specialty retailers. In the modern shopping centers, in the NCR, Delhi area, Gurgaon especially, or in Bombay or any of the major metros, you will see the same architecture. And there are 2 kinds of specialists, those who are specializing by only offering a specific product. And they have a sourcing advantage. Either they make it themselves or exclusively they get it from somebody that you cannot get anybody else. Almost specialty retailing. When the other ones are market specialists, which will be primarily those who segment the market and focus on one segment. Typical brick and mortar retailing, except one thing. For the same product line, let's say Nike shoes, you may have Sears Roebuck as one of the anchors, or Macy's or JCPenney in America. They will be actually offering same product about 20% cheaper, whereas the specialty store like the Foot Locker will be able to command 20% premium. And the question is, how can you do that only 100 feet apart? Economy says that's not a rational behavior. You should be shopping where the best value is for you. So there is something they do as value add, and the typical value add is basically exclusiveness, more choices within that limited product line. So you get more variety of Nike shoes or Adidas at the Foot Locker store than you would get, for example, at the Sears or JCPenney or Macy's. Similarly, there will be lifestyle stores, and we have quite a few that we know in India, and those lifestyle stores will be the same way. They will command premium. This is the discovery that you have the monopolistic competition commanding premium prices, or monopoly rents in economics, they call it, and you have the volume-driven players. So the anchors are low margin, high volume, and the specialty retailers are high margin, low volume, and they are contradictory, but they coexist at the same time. In fact, to create a good shopping center, you need both of them, which again doesn't make sense because they should be competing with each other. over a long cycle, they do compete. Industry typically starts out, lots of niche players come in, they're trying to grow very fast. Growth creates a collapse typically, as we have seen in the dot-com boom area in the 90s in America, as we are seeing right now in the streaming services, for example, as we are seeing in India, a lot of the fintech companies is the same phenomenon. And by the way back when, early 1900s, when the automobile industry became the driver of the economy, we had more than 125 automobile makers, each car making one car at a time in a garage, no scale, till Model T and Henry Ford changed the paradigm completely. So if you go to the next slide, please. And this is a very important slide, and I'll spend a few minutes on this one. On the right side are the full line generalists, and there's only room for 3. Number one usually has a 40% market share, which gives you this non-intuitive view that higher than 40% market share actually will not be profitable, because you'll be subsidizing some markets or subsidizing some product lines, whatever they are, as a full line generalist. Lowest market share on the right side of that curve, the green bar, is 10% market share. Below that one, you don't have the scale to be a volume-driven player. Uncanny results. 10% comes out like a clockwork across all industries. On the left side, you see niche players, but the slope is very sharp, which means if you're a super niche, you do very, very well financially. But as you try to grow, your margins begin to come down because of the growth essentially. And actually, quite a few companies, great startup companies in the dot-com, in the digital world, you'll see more of those and they collapse. So they go in the ditch, as we call it. Ditch is the place where you neither have the scale advantage on the right side, nor the differentiation advantage on the left side. And that is a very key one. The elasticity is not the same. So on the right side, the slope is very short, which says once an industry matures and the rule of 3 is in place, the economies of scale comes not as much from manufacturing or value add in services, but from sourcing. Do you have the economies of procurement? Because more often than not, in any manufacturing, about 60% is all raw materials components. And in fact, in the PC business, I find fascinating the value add by the PC maker, like HP, for example, or Acer or Lenovo, anybody, IBM ThinkPad at one time is only 11%. 89% is all procurement. Out of which 79% used to go, it has changed a little, to Microsoft and Intel. Intel has got good competitors now, but Microsoft still dominates. So as an assembly person with a brand name like an HP, I'm struggling to have any margins. And my vendor is making a lot of money, which is why sometimes companies end up doing vertical integration backward to the sourcing place. Apple has done a good job either on a contract basis or manufacturing in their own plants. That is very key. Slope is very slow, which says that no matter how much money I pour in marketing dollars, price competition, advertising competition, distribution competition, whatever I do, to gain market share significantly, to see any impact on my financial performance, it has to be a quantum jump. And the only way quantum jump happens is through acquisitions. So the big boys end up buying out others, and rule of 3 prevails, especially if you are number 4, number 5, number 6 company. You are very vulnerable. You are almost in the ditch if you are less than 10% market share. Or if the top player does not have 40%, there is a room for 4 or 5 people, but it's a great opportunity for, again, acquisition, merger acquisition to come to 3. Pharmaceutical industry is a classic example where the largest company used to be, one of the British companies at one time, GlaxoSmithKline, for example. It is only about 15%. Steel industry worldwide, if you analyze it, ArcelorMittal, which is an Indian origin company, has probably about 15% of the world capacity, about 1 billion tons. It is about 150 million tons through aggregation of different steel mills all over the world. Still a lot of room to go. So we watch the number 40% as the ultimate equilibrium, gives you enough strategic insight whether you should go for an acquisition as a growth or organic growth. Same thing on the left side, which I will come in a moment. So left side is more dangerous. Only reason companies don't collapse on the left side by not going for growth is family-run businesses. Family-run businesses typically tend to be not driven by financial markets or by stock market, and they tend to control growth because they're looking at family lifestyle in many ways, which plateaus them. So some of the best surviving niche companies in the wine industry, in the fine arts industry, if you look at it, are like 300, 400 years old because family runs the business. They are not driven by capital markets. But otherwise, if you go for the capital, as it is true for franchise operations, for example, I find predictability very clearly. The typical idea will come. You are a great idea person. You are the franchisor. You get the capital. You go public listed company. Now they demand, the stock market demands growth, and you collapse in the process. We have seen about 5, 6 pizza chains collapse like that. Very predictable. So let's go to the next slide, please. I'll come back to this slide in a moment. This is how the industry evolves typically. In the early stages, what it does not have is a scale, lots of small competitors, lack of technical standards. There is no standardization either by the government or de facto standard by one company dominating, aggregating whatever they do. High growth, low entry and exit barriers at that time. And of course, today in the internet age, entry exit barriers are very, very low. So you'll create thousands of these companies. What used to be only a few companies now becomes quite a lot. And excess capacity. Because each company thinks they will survive, so they put more capacity in place. And ultimately, there's too much capacity, not enough demand, especially if there's any kind of an economic downturn or COVID-19 that happens, pandemic creates a disruption. And most of them have a local focus or a regional focus. Now, as they become more from scale to scope, broadening out to revitalize, you have a few large competitors. There's a much more standardization of the processes and the technology, distribution systems, slow growth, high entry and exit barriers, high degree of specialization, and rationalized capacity. And focus tends to be more global by this time, especially because of the early 90s liberalization of trade, opening up of the markets like India, 1991 economic reforms, whatever they call it. Tina, next slide, please. So here is the summary of what happens. When markets get organized by competition, it results in 3 full-line generalists and lots of product market specialists. We have not been able to find a magical number about how many specialists should be in a market. We just have no idea. It varies by industry by industry. The 3 full-line generalists serve between 70 and 90% of the total market. The number 1 company usually has, as I mentioned, 40% market share. Number 2 has 20%, and number 3 has 10%. Next slide, please. The product market specialists serve the balance of the market, each with a very small market share between 1 and 5%. If the 3 full-line generalists do not concentrate 70% of the market, there is room for a 4th generalist or a 5th for that matter, so long as each one has at least 10% of the market share. Now, here is something uncanny I found. Number 1 and number 2 companies, when they compete for price in a non-growing market, it is not the number 1 who loses against number 2, but number 3 collapses and goes in the ditch. Absolutely predictable. General Motors and Ford, when they competed on price in the 70s, after the first energy crisis, number 3 collapsed, which was Chrysler. I can give you examples after examples, hundreds of them, like a predictability. Number 3, therefore, tries to have a segment of the market where they will be very dominant. Overall market share would be 10, and the segment may be geographic or a customer base or whatever they are. And that's how they survive, go in the ditch and then come out back again. Very predictable pattern. So next slide, please. So what are the strategies? If you're a specialist, the benchmarking that we have done, you have to be a service and selection driven. You have to offer a value above and beyond the product. There's an exclusivity advantage. Specialty business, primarily you define, and you can have multiple specialty businesses, but do not aggregate them. There's a very focused product line, limited product line that you offer. Or if you are a market specialist, then you offer a variety, but for that limited segment. There's an image and a service. Image is very important. Branding, so like a Gucci, for example, or a Tiffany brand or whatever they are. And you have very focused channels. Your distribution is very limited. Highly decentralized businesses. Each of the specialty store is independently operating. You may have a group, but you allow the autonomy to each one of them. They are specialized and dedicated resources to each one of them. And it is what we call the house of brands. Some companies have 18, 20 brands. We have a company in Atlanta which owns 300 brands, for example, but keep the businesses separate. As opposed to the 3 full-line generalists. The key advantage is not just volume, but I found velocity, which means how fast can you turn your capital. And the velocity concept always has been there in the retailing. We call it turns. I find that's true in manufacturing. In some industries, you are heavy asset, lots of capital is required. You make like 1 turn. If your capital is $100 million, your revenue is $100 million, for example, as opposed to $1 billion, 10 times the turn. Turn is a very important one, asset turn. One-stop shop, omni-channel we call it for retailers nowadays. You offer any product line. Amazon is a great area on the online side. Walmart is a great example in America on the retail brick and mortar side. Anything that's possible. And you have a value proposition. Primarily, you are competing on value for the money. Multiple channels, you are not loyal to any channel. However, you can sell the product. It's a good way of selling, etc., etc. Key point is the last one in marketing. Here, it is very important to have a master brand, which is a corporate brand, and then may have a subsidiary brand. It will be like General Electric. And you might have so many divisions, lighting division to power generation, energy division to aircraft engines or whatever they are. But GE name comes about as dominant one. And that is very important. I find fascinating that the most conglomerates with very different businesses are not the GE of the world or General Motors at one time of the world, but they turn out to be the fast-moving consumer goods, FMCG sector. Because you are listed only one as a single company, but you own a coffee business on the one hand, and you own a detergent business, and you can't mix them at all. Manufacturing, sourcing, everything has to be separate. So the two can be mixed physically. It's dangerous. You have a retail common customer like a Walmart, but that does not define the market. Market has to be defined by competition. Your detergent competition is very different. Procter & Gamble competes with Unilever, but also Henkel. Whereas in your coffee business, you may be competing with General Foods or some coffee company in Europe, for example, or Starbucks for that matter. This is very important to understand that if you are a specialist, your whole strategy is very different than if you are a generalist. Next page, please, Tina. So here are the key strategies that I've identified one can do. If you are a number 1 company, close to that 40%, what should be your defensive strategy and what should be your aggressive offensive strategy? Offensive strategy is very fascinating because it is no longer the pride of invention, discovery with which you might have come up as a company, like Coca-Cola, for example, or IBM, for example, or Amazon, for example, or whatever they are. The key strategy is very different, and that is that fast follow. Imitate the niche guys or buy them out if necessary. So fast follower is a key strategy. And we'll go to the next chart and come back to this one. And the defensive strategy is grow the total market. If you're a dominant player and there's nothing else out there to compete with you, then the best strategy for you is not to compete anymore, but to grow the pie, essentially. So if you go to the next page where I've articulated all these strategies, we might go over in some details. So right now, the best fast followers And they imitate like anything are the traditional Silicon Valley companies who are doing very well. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Facebook, they just copy little guys out there and they copy from the world. Grow the total market, Coca-Cola simply says there's a saturation point about how much Coca-Cola people can drink. With the aging of the population, can we grow the total market by going into other countries, for example, or going into segments or offering more beverages? So many different varieties like water, non-carbonated beverages, whatever they can do. Huawei Technologies, which is in the news, is fantastic. They've learned how to grow the market, especially in other emerging markets, maturing the technology, including 5G now in China, but offering it in Africa, for example, or in India, for example, which we are banned right now, but that's a very key one. And so CPG industries or fast-moving consumer goods, growing the total market becomes very important strategy. And how do you do that thing? Converting non-users to users is the best strategy. And we have seen this in social media. People who are not doing a social media like Facebook, how much popular in India. I never heard about it 5 years ago till somebody said, let's have a call on WhatsApp. What was a messaging thing became a voice, and now I can do media. Zoom is the other one, and Uber is another example. Non-users converting into users is growing the total pie. If you're a number 2 company, what should you do? Your aggressive strategy is coexist with the leader, don't fight. So today, Tata Tea is number 2 in the world in beverages after Unilever, which is a whole tea division with brands like Lipton on the one hand, Brook Bond. I think they bought a couple of brands to dominate that market. And we have seen the same thing coexist with the leader are generics in pharmaceuticals. They don't compete with the prescription or branded discovery companies, but they coexist as a supplement. Eventually, they will compete. And of course, Lyft is a number 2 in this ride sharing. And again, they coexist for a while. Once you have reached a certain market share, generally 10% or above, now you begin to challenge the leader. So Lowe's is number 2 in Home Depot is number 1 in do-it-yourself products. And they now are challenging each other. Lenovo is beginning to challenge HP now, for example. Higher in appliances, and I've done a lot of work in appliance industry for Whirlpool. We have monitored the whole scenario globally. And of course, Haier is coming up as a very big player, along with a company from Sweden, for example. Rule of 3 is coming on a global basis. Full line generalist, if you are number 3, right at that border, what should you do? Insulate from competition, especially number 1, number 2, by having a segment where nobody can compete or a market. Alibaba falls into that category. China, they are so dominant. Worldwide, they're okay. Specialty pharma comes in that category. And of course, it is not number 1, number 2 company in every industry. Number 3 company is the most innovative. And we saw that in India in the wireless industry. Reliance Jio came out of nowhere as a number 3 player and took over the market. I can tell you in the airline industry in India, the same thing. Whether it is Jet Airways when they came out or Indigo now, it just goes on and on. So you are basically the disruptor through technology or through some innovation pricing separately, etc. And of course, innovation is a key survival game for you. So number 3 with lower R&D budget is more innovative than number 1 or number 2 company, which is a very large budget. And in Silicon Valley today, you can see very clearly that the disruptors are all niche companies or becoming big now, competing against IBM, competing against Microsoft for that matter. And that is the key area. Next slide, please. What about the niche players? If you are on the niche side of the business, what should you do? If you are a serial entrepreneur, as opposed to an inventor, then the ideal strategy is to make a premium sell to the generalist. Bring it down to about 4 or 5% growth, and then jump over on the other side by exiting the business. Many companies have done that. Gatorade in specialty drinks, energy business. Skype, for example, is owned by Microsoft now. Maybelline is a cosmetic company. I can give you examples after examples. If you're a family-run business and you don't want to be sold, then go super niche. In other words, don't go for the mass market, go for specialty In cruise lines, you have seen that thing. Rolls-Royce clearly is going higher and higher prices in the automotive sector. And you go from luxury to what I call super luxury brands. What about people who are not doing well, ditch dwellers as we call them? He says you can get out of the ditch if you fell from the right side as a generalist, fell into the ditch because of competition, or even number 4, number 5 players. Now you go out on the left side as being a specialist. A BlackBerry is still alive, was a very big one, but today it is meant primarily for government business security aspects. Iridium was the architecture created at Motorola, low orbiting satellites, supposed to be very big, did not do very well, but today it is used by reporters in remote places, by the military in remote places, because that's the only way you can communicate. There is no cellular phone access at that time. Or if you are a ditch dweller, become a consolidator. Very possible. So you might basically get a investment banker, buy the struggling company as it is happening right now across many industries because of the COVID phenomenon in the retailing, aggregate all of the ditch dwellers and become a large company. JP Morgan made money on this one at turn of the century. And private equity investors are very key in this strategy. Next slide, please. And I will run fast because of the time. So we can manage the time with more questions and answers. This rule of 3 is uncanny. If the market you are contesting is local primarily, rule of 3 is there, like in medical hospitals. In America, we are very local, and usually one will be a government hospital, one will be a private hospital, like Emory University is a private hospital group, and one will be what we call a faith-based denomination hospital, some Christian church-based hospital, or whatever faith they belong to. Typically, 3 hospital groups will survive in a local market. Banks in America used to be highly unit banking, as we call it. India, of course, we have a branch banking. In our case, unit banking, again, in a given town, there'll be only 3 banks that will be dominating. Then you'll have the community banks. If the industry goes from local to national, huge consolidation, as in airlines business took place. European Union that was formed, you see consolidation between the French and the Italian and the German, just goes on combination to become a European company. And regional to global is what we are doing more research now. We says again in personal computers, it is a global competition. Consumer electronics, it's global competition. US has already exited the market, even though they invented quite a lot like television. It is all dominated now by not only Japan is exiting, Korea is still there in the play, but it's all Chinese now. Surprisingly, you find 94% of the world's microwave ovens are all made in China. Daily necessity. I can have a revolt in the country if I stop supplying microwave ovens. It was invented in America. We exited. Japanese took over. Japanese exited. Koreans took over. Koreans have exited. China is the de facto maker. For whatever reason, they seem to have the price advantage, cost advantage, etc. Just goes on. There are many other examples. Airbnb, Uber, etc., etc. So next slide, please. So what happens? At one time, we had the 3 markets out there, each market restricted from competition from outside. US would have 3 players. Europe would have 3 or 4 players when British economy was a part of that. We'll have a German player, a French player, an Italian player, and a British player. And when the consolidation takes place, and by the way, Japan would have 3 players, like 3 automobile makers in Japan, but they'll be domestic primarily. When globalization takes place, there is no room for 9 players, no matter how big you are as a company, it always collapses to 3 players through mergers, acquisitions, or exit. If you go to the next slide, Tina, please. So here are the examples. Passenger car tire industry, I worked in the industry in the 80s. America used to dominate the world. Today, Goodyear is the only survivor. Firestone is gone, BF Goodrich is gone, and Goodrich itself may not survive in the future as our forecast. Bridgestone, which used to be the main company, today you have the Toyo in Yokohama, but Bridgestone at that time acquired actually Firestone, became very large, and you have the Michelin group out of England or out of Europe primarily, French company, survived Pirelli is not doing well, and Dunlop collapsed, for example. So Michelin, Bridgestone, Goodyear, this is about to change since the largest car markets are now China, followed probably by India. So the tire companies from China we are watching has to become global as the tire companies from India may become global. Automobile industry, the same thing. We had great three companies that dominated, and then we had rich companies like American Motors, so GM, Ford, Chrysler. We had a Toyota, Nissan, Honda in Japan. We had a Renault, Peugeot, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, lots of players in continental Europe. Industry has consolidated, but still we have too many players. So automobile industry is inevitable to consolidate. Volkswagen became number one group. Toyota is number two, especially from a market valuation viewpoint. Renault Nissan was a good combination, but is messed up now with all the political leadership issues with Japan. Fiat Chrysler, again, interesting place, right? Question mark. There's a question mark whether GM may survive, or Ford may survive, or Honda may survive. There are some interesting combinations you find because Honda is a volume-driven, good engine. BMW is a niche player, good engine. Both are the same platforms for what they do. Merger of the two would provide a luxury brand on the one hand and mass market brand on the other hand. But Honda has to decide whether it wants to remain in the automobile business or in the motorcycle business, for example. Next slide, please. Now, we had three major manufacturers for aircraft: Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, and Lockheed, commercial aviation. Lockheed became mostly military. Now only de facto is Boeing. Europeans did not want the domination of Boeing after World War II, so they created their own consortium, and the Airbus is the brand name they use for commercial aviation. There's a question mark. And we are totally convinced that the next player will be out of China, not out of Russia. Bombardier is too small, UAC is not gonna work, and therefore Comac is the name of the company. So we are watching Chinese not blessing Boeing anymore with the tension between China and America. And this is a massive shift because automobile industry, appliance industry, aircraft have a huge supplier value chain. 4D, 5D, which means if you are an ultimate assembler, all suppliers have to come with you, whatever they are. This gives an enormous advantage to the China in all these three markets. We are watching about manufacturing in the automobile. We are watching manufacturing in appliances with Haier and other companies, and the aircraft manufacturing. They're all metal bending. And by the way, now you see a disruptor coming from outside called Tesla. There you go, all electric. Still a very niche company from volume viewpoint. Number of units they make is so small. But today its valuation is bigger than any one of these car makers. It has a huge market capital. Does it play in China market? And if so, does it totally disrupt the Chinese market in terms of the Chinese players? Becomes a national issue. Sometimes policymakers have to come because it's a huge employment industry. So it's very fascinating. Last slide I will take and then pick up any questions you have. Let's go for the last slide, please. Where does the rule of three does not happen? In globalization or any place? Here are 4 conditions under which rule of three does not happen till those conditions are removed. First one is in patent-based industries. Pharmaceutical is a classic where you have a sub-monopoly. And there's a lot of debate going on whether pharmaceutical company industries or companies are gouging the market. We have a lot of criticism of the pharma companies because of the high prices. I mean, you can duplicate that by generics, for example. So generics may come in, but if the patent regime is changed by policy, there's a new approach to patent that we can design, pharma industry can become liberated and you will see consolidation taking place and the rule of three will come. And technology companies have a huge patent protections. Once that goes away or somebody duplicates that in some fashion, it changes the industry. Second one is important in India because we have lots of owner-managed family businesses. Professional services like accounting, legal are all family businesses. Advertising agencies used to be like that till the family ownership decided they will sell because there was no successor in planning. And therefore it became 3 large groups. WPP became the largest one out of nowhere. You have the Omnicon Group, for example, and now we have the Dentsu, Leo Burnett, Publicis, which is a French company. There are 3 global players, like a clockwork. Regulated monopolies, you don't see this kind of a rule of 3 till they are deregulated. So utility industry, we have deregulated the power generation business in America, huge consolidation, and you see 3 major power producers. General Electric depends on them, as would be Siemens, for example, because they're the suppliers for the parts, components, etc. And on the other hand, at the distribution level, basically you will have sub-monopolies by and large. And that's the very key area in regulated industries. Telephone industry got deregulated. I worked quite a lot in telephone industry. In fact, I'm sort of the advisor in commercializing the cellular telephones in America. 1983, we started the project for the Bell system, AT&T, and for Bell Labs. And at that time, outside consultants told us there is no market, maybe 950,000 best market you can have by year 2000, because they thought very differently, business to business service. Today, cellular telephone is large business. China, the largest market, India, second largest market, and America becoming distant third. It is so democratized. And rule of 3 prevails again there, both in manufacturing. So you see Huawei, Ericsson, and you see, one more company out of Europe, and we are struggling around here with Qualcomm. There will be some consolidation, or the government will come and protect, not allowing Huawei to come in, for example, and therefore patronize the other companies, which will be Ericsson, for example, which is very interesting. So government can interfere in the markets, not to allow the rule of 3 to emerge, but if the markets are not protected, they are free, rule of 3 prevails. And of course, there are many protected markets. China still has many industries where full-blown competition is not allowed, both domestically or outside. India has also some protective things, because we began with the license Raj, we are liberalizing the economy, but in many industries, we don't allow full-blown competition. I find fascinating, as I mentioned, India has the size, but not the scale. I'm a publicly advocate that we have just too many banks. India has a large market for banking, but too many banks. So in world rankings, you never come out. You don't need 70, 80, 90 banks in India. They are owned by government, state enterprises. Government can orchestrate consolidation, which creates efficiencies quite a lot, presence quite a lot, and also at the same time, access to capital. That is true of many industries in India, I find. And generally in India, you find number 1 brand would be a national, but number 2 brand is a state brand, essentially. In consumer packaged goods, that's very common. So India, as it liberalizes and allows more choices in the marketplace, you will see the rule of 3 happening in the automobile industry, in the tractor industry, for example, carbon black industry. I can give you industries after industries, and in many of the consumer products at the brand level, not at the company level, because companies own very different businesses where competition is not the same. I've taken a little longer time than I thought. I hope that you have enjoyed the presentation. I will stop here and then pick up any questions. Thank you.
No, certainly it has been, lot of learning, lot of new things, and you kept us, just attached and glued to what exactly you are speaking. So it's been very, very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you so very much. And I would now request our team to take up questions, because as I mentioned, we have been receiving questions for the last 3 days, and questions today also received directly at our WhatsApp and mail groups. So they will pick up the questions. I know your time limitation. You gave us time up to 9:15, and we'll wind up at that time. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Sir, I'll take the first question. There's a question by Bikram Datta which says, how can organizations take advantage of blue ocean strategy in an uncertain marketing environment?
Yes, exactly. The blue ocean strategy is very key, especially if the industry has matured. Competing against each other basically is a no-win situation, zero sum. What you do, we identify a new all blue ocean strategy, as it is called. Don't fight in the red oceans, but go into blue oceans. And the typical blue oceans are adjacent markets quite often. Or if you're a manufacturer, A blue ocean is services that come about. If you're Siemens, General Electric, you put large capacity, which is capital expenditures, but there's a whole maintenance repair business. F-16 fighter plane, which is one of the popular planes, but it is 3 generations old in America. You don't make any more F-16s anymore because you are motor, but it has about $50 billion maintenance revenue all over the world. So one of the blue ocean strategies will be to go from product to services, as many retailers are doing. And blue oceans will go into other markets where nobody is there, even markets which are called frontier markets nowadays. Very early stage industrialization. Many of them are in Africa, for example, some are in Latin America, and there may be frontier markets in India by geography. You may be serving everything, but not the Northeast. Northeast in India is still called a frontier market in many ways, and you say, I will go there. So there are always a possibilities. For Indian corporations, going abroad is a very good blue ocean strategy. And you don't have to go all the way to America, please. FMCG sector, I can easily go to Bangladesh. I can easily go to Southeast Asia. So long as I have a quality product, a brand name that people are spending. Or I can go into the diaspora market worldwide, which is a large market for Indian pickles and papads and whatever you have it. So it's very possible.
Thank you so much. And now I'll ask one question on behalf of President Rotary Club Central Delhi and very famous, renowned Dr. Ganesh Mani. Of course,
Yes.
he has sent 3-4 questions, but I'll ask one because there's so many other questions from the public. He's asking primarily, does the rule of 3 apply to healthcare providers? And, is super luxury healthcare or niche market globally, locally?
Very good point. The rule of 3 does come into the healthcare delivery side, as opposed to, it is always there in the manufacturing of medical devices. The big ones would all used to be Philips, Siemens, and General Electric, 3 players, globally, by the way. But as we get into smaller and smaller affordable devices, industry is just getting organized and it'll consolidate at the equipment making, okay? At the pharmaceutical, because of the patent rights, it doesn't allow one company to dominate across multiple patents. So you have a race between Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, for example, GlaxoSmithKline, and there are BSF, for example. They're buying out Monsanto. The mergers, acquisitions are taking place. Delivery is the toughest one. Last leg, where you have hospital groups, clinics, where what happens is that you can have a regional rule of 3 player. So you may have the Apollo group on the one hand and some other group in the south, Hyderabad, Chennai, etc., city by city. I do believe that the healthcare service industry will be basically changed the way it does business right now by the technology-based companies. Again, typical digitized approach, online procurement. There are companies that have come in terms of home health services, where the consumer cannot go to the clinic or to the hospital, so the hospital or the clinic comes. We are watching the trend here, and I think it's going to happen in India. Today, for the first time with the COVID restrictions, we are finding that both the hospital groups, the doctors, and me as a patient, we are on virtual meetings through Zoom. Now, here is the finding. Doctors find it better to do business with. The patients like it. To me, both sides are winning in the process. The hassle of going to the doctor's office, parking wherever it is, sitting with other patients who may have other diseases, waiting forever, for example. So far, my virtual meetings using Zoom, it's called telemedicine in my days. I don't want to go to the doctor first anymore. I want a Zoom meeting first. Doctor is always on time.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So to me, something like a Zoom technology may become what is a peripheral, may become dominant in terms of, then of course the surgery, elective surgeries versus emergency surgeries, etc. But I think it'll be more in India, regional consolidation, rule of 3, somewhere in the NCR area, somewhere in the Bombay, Maharashtra area, somewhere in the South. It'll be spotted. Nationally, rule of 3, I don't see happening in India partly because of the regulation, partly because each group, has a separate listing on the stock market, whatever you talk about.
So thank you so much. Please take up next question, Ankur.
Right, sir.
No.
I had a question.
The second part. Yeah, there is a very strong super premium market
Okay.
in healthcare. The nations that we do research on, I've done a whole research on medical tourism for India. Very big market potential, actually. About 1 million people come, mostly people of Indian origin, settle all over the world for elective things like dentistry is the most popular one. People go for dental care because it's so expensive in the rest of the world. You go for dental care plus some elective surgeries like knee replacement, etc. But some of the best countries in the world for medical tourism or high luxury tourism are Thailand, surprisingly, Mexico, surprisingly, some Cayman Island countries, our Caribbean island countries. So my view is that if they can do it, we can do it in India.
Yeah,
with
right.
better expertise and better equipment. So.
Quite right. Thank you. Ankur, please take up.
Yeah. So I had a question, sir. About 30% of the audience today are business management students. So
right.
we've, till now talked about competition at the corporate level, at the industry level. So you've been in academics for 50 years and you've taught students across the world. So what advice do you have for students in their early years right now? How do they deal with the competition and emerge as winners?
Very good point. The competition will be enormous. There are about 4 or 5 industry sectors that are going to grow in India post-COVID. COVID is basically locking down the potential to be released. One of the biggest industries growing is consumer packaged goods industry. Consumer demand is changing in India from what is unbranded products. We are now becoming more and more brand conscious consumers. Atta, lentils, wheat, rice, all becoming branded, right? And similarly, unorganized sector is becoming more organized retailing now. The traditional street vendor is going away more and more. In India, the biggest excitement for a student or young person is to convert a street vendor food and make it into a branded, regional, or national food. Have you seen how many potato chips are made by different people in India now? Used to be totally unbranded, loose, but I can make it today. Frito-Lay has done very well. Haldiram has done well. Haldiram used to be one shop, usually where you ate there and you picked up your packet. Today, Haldiram packaged is all over the world. There's a company in New Jersey called Deep Foods, DEEP, one of the best companies. They even do frozen foods for the Indian market. Now in the main supermarkets, you can get that brand. Huge opportunity. So any street food or beverage in India, tremendous opportunity to convert into if you're an entrepreneur. That's one career. The consumer markets are going online. Retailing is going online. So you may have the Flipkart, obviously, and then you have the Fresh Basket or whatever the names are, out there. But you also have a very strong Amazon presence. And eventually you will see Walmart presence through Flipkart in a bigger way. I think all that, and we have the Reliance coming out in a big way. Reliance Jio platform will become the retail platform and probably will be like Reliance Jio on the network side. Our estimates are running that Jio may become the largest online retailer in India out of nowhere. And then online retailers usually have some shops. Whether you use existing shops as your merchant providers, whatever you do. So there's a huge opportunity in the consumer sector if you think about all the things you do and companies that serve you. Second area is defense. Very large need to upgrade India's defense, especially given the border threats now coming from China on the one hand, the alliance that is taking place between Australia, Japan, India, and America for the South Asia, South China Sea area, pretty much. Defense will be a major growth sector in India. Third one is infrastructure. There's a need for so much of public infrastructure. At least 20 or 30 airports, like within 2 years, you should have in the second, third tier cities. After the COVID, obviously, all of this, right? You have a whole security business. And India is becoming more and more digital. So there are lots of digital companies, so you have employment in all those. But I would say to prepare for a good job, you have to have two things going for you. Get some practical work experience while you are in college. Does not have to be through the college. You know, earning on your own, side money will give you another experience. In America, we all do that thing. Top students come here and they become waiters in a restaurant. Okay. So you have to have a dignity of labor. Our biggest problem is that our college students have this attitude that I cannot take a cup of tea I just drank, I have to have a servant come and pick it up. So we need to have a more respect for all kinds of work. That's the one thing that I worry about India, that we are creating a society which is becoming more and more caste-oriented by task, not by birth. That's not my job, you know. But today you cannot be a good software engineer without knowing coding. Coding is a platform. You have to learn the mundane job, and that you can learn. I also find that we all get students from good families by definition, and they are usually somewhat little arrogant because they've made it. The best way to make them modest is to be putting in front of a customer. And the best job is to be a restaurant waiter, and you will see how hard life can be. The guest will abuse you in any way possible, and you have no choice but to put up and learn how to manage that thing. So I'm a very much believer that in our PGPM courses, we must have vocational technical training. What we teach is know why theory, why does it happen, laws of engineering, laws of business, but we don't know how. So know how is as important as know why. That's the next curriculum we are planning out for all the MBA programs, you know? Experiential learning as it is called. Sorry to give you a long answer.
No, not at all. Truly appreciate it. Dr. Bansal, we just have 3 minutes left. So in case you want to ask the last question.
I
No
can go a
worries.
little longer.
Okay.
I can go a little
Sure.
longer. If
So then,
necessary.
Ankur, you can carry on with one or two more questions.
Yeah.
Mr. Bansal, could I have one question if possible?
Sure.
Yes, please go ahead.
What we are all experiencing in the world because of the pandemic is a disruption like never before. So what are the 2 or 3 big changes you can see in global trends post things become okay with the pandemic?
Very clearly. The first, of course, is since pandemic is not limited in time, but extending more and more, survival is the game. How do you survive? In business, survival means cash flow. So how do you somehow conserve your cash flow, go deep into your reserves, some family wealth or whatever it is, to survive the business? That's clearly survival is the game. Second one is improvisation. We have learned so much how to improvise. Sharing the limited space at home or wherever remotely we work from. And I have a whole paper on this one about post-COVID consumption and the future of work and all the stuff. So there are some significant change that are taking place. It'll make us a little more efficient in the way we utilize time and space, which are very important. Everything we do is anchored by time or by space or by location. So that's a clear improvisation will generate so much new innovation, which may become business opportunities down the road. This has been a good thing to disrupt our lives so that the status quo is not there. In terms of manufacturing, supply chain got so disrupted that today, for the first time, this event will create what I call re-globalization. People talk about deglobalization. No, that's not the case. It's re-globalization, which means I don't have to make it in one place within the country or in one country to supply the world, because that country may be under COVID-19 phenomenon, as opposed to just an earthquake or tsunami or something like that, which is localized, but this is national. So you distribute your manufacturing worldwide, supply chain. So you make more mini factories all over the world. So the production comes closer to consumption now. Supply chain remains the same, but it is distributed now. And I did a session on future of manufacturing exactly on that point. And that looks very good, actually. So that economies of scale will be there. And so to me, there'll be more distributed manufacturing. For India, it's a great advantage because as people try to de-risk from China, India is becoming in the radar screen for the world to say, how can I do it? India has a tremendous resource advantage. I do a session on separately on that one with our human capital. So we are going to become make in India manufacturing, yes, but more make in India services sector. There's no country like India in terms of the scale size. Hyderabad is becoming another Bangalore easily, in fact, and maybe bigger and better, surprisingly. All the accounting firms want to do business in India now. All the publishing industries are doing their back office work in India. Legal services coming in India. Special effects studios are coming in India, high valued, not just the BPO business. And you see now Microsoft, Google, Facebook, all the new generation companies are now putting their R&D, which is a very high level. So my view is that India has to think about high wage jobs, not low wage, per hour calculation. Why $5 per hour when you can go to $100 per hour job, and high tech at the same time. We are a very low tech company, and how do we become high tech? Fortunately, digitization is there pretty much. So I think it's very possible.
And sir, one small thing, because you're so deeply and closely associated as a great academic leader in India and across the world, what do you see how the education is going to change in the next couple of years? And
Yes,
today, of course, the government of India has announced its new education policy. Of course, it is just like that. But I would like to learn out of you, because all the academia sitting over here is also looking for the right direction, and one is not really very sure how things are going to get into.
There are three different areas that are coming in the picture. One is that what the nation needs are to really make vocational technical training highly certified. Tomorrow's plumber, tomorrow's electrician is not the same as today's plumber electrician.
Yeah.
In fact, if tomorrow's auto repair guy cannot touch the automobile, is basically a computer, high tech. And today's auto repair person cannot do it without a machine and etc. By putting more certified occupational vocational training, then you basically increase the wages of these people. So that's very important. To me, significant part of 10+2 strategy that we have, the +2 has to change dramatically before they come to college. It's not just a stepping stone to go to college, but one can easily go into like 1 or 2 year associate degrees where that's the one. And let me give you, I'm so sorry to belabor this point, but if you take a software engineer, 10+2+3, 15 years, he joins a company like TCS or Wipro or Infosys, usually let's say in a Bangalore or Delhi NCR area, he will command about maybe, I would say 50,000, 60,000 rupees a month, okay? Out of which 20,000 goes immediately paying as a paying guest in some family, a room, right? Sleeping night. Additional 10, 15,000 goes just in eating out because he does not know how to cook. He cannot cook in the room anyhow. Then of course he's modern. He has a girlfriend or a girlfriend has a boyfriend, so they have to do night engagements. At the end of the month, he has no discretionary income. Actually, he's in debt. Think about that. Now compare that with a crane operator in the port of Mundra in Kutch or in Gujarat. He makes slightly more than that, about 80,000 rupees a month now. He's married, 10+2 education maximum, but then certification. He's married, so he has no rent. He lives in his parents' house. He's married because his wife now is a homemaker taking care of the aging parents and the children. He has an enormous discretionary income. He has nothing else to spend. So he spends on a motorcycle. So he can go back and forth from home to the work in a more predictable way rather than rely on a local transport system. He would like to have better clothes for his children, for his family. Eventually aspire to buy a bigger home so parents can live more comfortably. And he is ultimately saying, what can I do to invest in my child or my children so they will be more than a crane operator? This is the excitement in India, not in big cities, please.
Very right.
And one has to figure out how to leverage that. Now, on the other side, when you go to postgraduate education, there is a strong recommendation that what was peripheral, which is online education, will become core. What is core will become peripheral, which is in-person education. They reverse the role essentially. Second thing is that we must add experiential learning. Know how, not just know why. So most of the business schools in America clearly have now a investment club. If you're a finance major, you have to bet on the stock market, not just talk about it. These experiential labs are very necessary. You know, ultimately business education is more like medicine and more like engineering. You have to do things. It's not social science.
Yeah.
We made the mistake of organizing as a social science, like economics maybe, like sociology, like anthropology. We have to go toward a clinical side. A doctor cannot do except to touch the cadaver, see the patient. You have to have 3 years of clinical experience before you qualify. Same thing, an engineer, even first year, second year has to build a contraption, something that's tangible, feasible. I think we don't do that enough in business. And how do we change the curriculum to do that? So those are the 3 key areas.
Quite right, very right. No, that's very, very important because that continues to be a question mark in all people connected with the academia in the country. So, I mean, that's what, and let's see how education policy changes are framed. And, this, again, the possibility or as per the policy, international universities coming to India.
Yes.
What exactly do you think, are they keen to come to India? Is India ready to have them? I mean, in the short run, long run, of course, one doesn't really know how things change. But in the next 3 to 5 years, what do you really see?
Especially now that world is distancing so much from China, which means the rest of the world looks at India in a very different light.
Right.
Whether you are in Germany or in France or in England or in America.
Okay.
America is very important. Here is the reason. Indian students studying abroad is a very large amount of burden on our foreign exchange.
Yeah.
In America alone, I think we have probably more than 200,000 Indian students paying big fees. The question is, with visa issues now also, cross-border problems, is it possible for a top university, let's say Carnegie Mellon, to come to India? It is more likely to happen in engineering, I think, more than any other discipline in the short run. So Carnegie Mellon, MIT, Stanford, Georgia Tech, University of Illinois will come physical campuses because distance learning has a time zone problem. So I do expect that if Indian policy, HRD policy about foreign universities physically being there is clarified properly in a positive way, I think it will be very important to have them because my view is that best way to increase standards of what we do in India is either accreditation, not regulation. That's compliance theory.
Yeah.
So ASCSB type, accreditation body, IEEE accreditation, or to have world-class universities show how it can be done in India.
Yeah, quite
so
right.
And so then we'll have universities from Australia will come in. They're pretty good. England has some very good universities. They can come. You talk about the world wanting to say, especially English speaking, to say we can put, and we have basically typical education capitals. Like Manipal became an education capital. Noida is education capital. Chandigarh is an education capital. I can give you examples. So they identify a cluster comes in where all the universities from foreign countries may be located in 1 or 2 locations. just as an infrastructure. I think it's very important to invite them. I must tell you. Otherwise, you know, we are chugging along.
Yeah, quite right.
We are comfortable. We are comfortable.
Very right.
We don't have. So again, competition will wake us up more in education than anything else.
Perfectly right. No,
Right, so
really...
if you allow, we'll take one final question.
Yeah.
It's from our budding entrepreneurs and a lot of our students going into startup. They're saying, what advice do you have for, students in their early 20s preparing to become entrepreneurs? How do they deal with the competition of the big industrialists and the big companies?
Actually, the answer is other way around. You are more a threat to them than they are a threat to you. They will try to squash you, obviously. So the best thing here are very simple rules. Entrepreneurship can come from passion or come from survival. Some of the best entrepreneurs have come through Great Depression, for example, or refugees, because it's a game of survival. I think if you have a passion for entrepreneurship, then you need to have a network where you go and learn quite a lot about what entrepreneurship is all about. We are creating now, obviously, innovation centers within universities who can nurture them. I've been very fortunate to be the advisor to IIT Bombay, where we have created a whole entrepreneurship program. I think in the second year, after 5 years, these are all typical IIT graduates, so they join the university or IIT Bombay. And then in the second year, they say, I would like to specialize or minor. So there may be industrial engineering, chemical engineering, but I would like to minor in entrepreneurship. So we have designed a whole curriculum. And last count, we started 3-4 years ago from 40, 50 students. This year might be about 1,000 students wanting to be entrepreneurs. And they do everything together from end to end. Curriculum is designed. Not only that, but they are properly guided through each of the steps involved. They have to come out with a commercially viable product, physical product, in many cases, some services. They are incubated in IIT Bombay. They have expanded the capacity. Venture capitalists are waiting there. Angel investors are waiting there. And therefore, they identify. And some of those, when I come to India, I meet with them. It's just so great. I tell you, and I will take a couple of minutes myself now. The real competitive advantage of a nation is not capital or machinery. It is entrepreneurship. If you have an entrepreneurial DNA, that nation will always do better, so long as the ecosystem nurtures that entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship is more universal. It does not recognize gender. Women are actually as good or better entrepreneurs, surprisingly. But we made sure that they have the role model of being homemakers. So we never allowed their potential out to become entrepreneurs. I mean, Bangladesh has clearly shown through Muhammad Yusuf, for example, is renting the buffalo. Women entrepreneurs in a group do much better. So women entrepreneurship. It does not recognize age. Young people can be entrepreneurs, so can be older people. It does not recognize literacy. Some of the best entrepreneurs are totally illiterate people, and others are scientists, for example. It does not recognize faith. Every faith has entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurship is the DNA of India. And therefore, what can we do as academic institutions or as thought leaders or as infrastructure for entrepreneurs, like innovation, industrializing entrepreneurship, basically? It should not remain as a mom and pop R&D, but large scale. What can we do as a nation from a policy viewpoint? Corporations have a vested interest to invest in these people. So what can corporations do? What can NGOs do? Because there are so many people who want to be social entrepreneurs. So how can you incubate them in the NGO world, whether you are Pratham or Akshay Patra or whatever they are? I mean, Akshay Patra is brilliant in the way they have a supply chain for daily making meals for huge, large size. There may be so much possibilities. So I think entrepreneurship is something very important for the nation. It's unlocking the potential of people.
Well, that's really great. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. And I repeat my request of, possibly whatever way we can be working together, holding each other hands to take your dream and take your, wishes forward in this part of the country. We'll be very happy to do it. And even now, such a large number of people, more than 513 people are present even now listening to you.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's something very remarkable. And
Can
I
I
once
take
again, please, sir,
can I-
please.
Let me make one comment. I am a refugee from Burma. When Japan took over Burma before World War II, their intent was to come to India, and they took over all the countries in the southeast. I come from a merchant community, from a very small village in Kutch near Mundra. My father went to Burma because Myanmar and Rangoon or Yangon was going to be capital for British Empire divided into two, East Asia, which was Myanmar capital, Rangoon, and West Asia would be Calcutta, which was one capital at one time. So many people had gone to Burma for their entrepreneurship. He's a trader, merchant, totally high school, not even high school educated. He brought his two families and a cousin, four families. I was born there. I became a refugee. By the time we decided to leave Burma because of the incoming onslaught, Burma was occupied by the Japanese. We lost everything. We went back to the village where we have a shop. Even today, I would be totally uneducated. I may know broken English, broken Gujarati or whatever it is, barely know how to read and write. And I would be earning in that little typical, the panwala shop for about 5,000, 6,000 rupees a month, and I'll be happy. I did not know my own potential. It is the role of the society and the institutions and individuals that we unlock the potential of the others. So if you take a grain of wheat, which is an agricultural commodity, and make it into a loaf of bread, the value add is only 3 times. 1/3 cost is the wheat. If you take a rough diamond and polish it, the value add is about 15, 20 times from finished cut diamond versus a rough diamond. If you take a human being, mentor, educate, polish, give opportunities, the value add is infinite. And this is the future of India. We don't have to go abroad to do this thing. If we have the ecosystem created in India itself, then it's not the responsibility of the government alone, it is the responsibility of every institution, whether it's a business institution, government institution, faith institution, temples, gurus, whatever they are. It's our collective responsibility to unlock the potential of India through its human capital. It's not the right word people say about human capital, but I believe that is a key competence. And we have so much of built-in DNA. It can be done. As Italy has done historically, or as America is doing it right now, people find fortunes in this country. Why? Because it is an ecosystem that says, if you want to be an entrepreneur and a capitalist, it's more power to you. But as I said, entrepreneurship is not limited to capitalism. Social entrepreneurship is equally important. It's a question of just learning how to do business the right way. So I feel very strongly that I think we have the opportunity for India to become definitely one of the dominant, most admired nations in the world. Ultimately, you get soft power from creating world-class brands or world-class movie producers or world-class whatever they are.
Very right.
Going in the future, world-class technology. We are respected for technology. We are respected as scientists, space program. We can do it. It's a question of doing it much larger scale to unlock the potential of the people. If we can do it right, I think India has no upper limit of what we can do. Okay.
Thank you, sir. But for doing right, that's what I'm requesting. For doing right, you need to be guiding us and holding our hand. We are willing to take that leadership. We are willing to take that lead and take that relay from you to take forward. So we bank upon you. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Bansal.
Thank you so much, sir. And I thank once again all the partners of NDIM into this great event. I thank all the people from academia, all the people from the corporate world, very senior people who have spent time, first of all, registering with us and staying with us for the last 2 hours. I'm extremely grateful to them. And I repeat my request to each one of them to let us work together. Let us share each other's problems and let us share best practices. We can certainly move forward in a very, very big way. And tomorrow, of course, we will not have great people like Professor Dr. Jagdish Sheth coming to us in the next couple of days. We'll have it again couple of months. I'm sure I'll be able to request him and prevail upon him. Tomorrow we have, Professor Charles from INSEAD, France, and he'll be speaking on a very, very important subject, and that is invisible work of highly effective leaders. So I request all the participants to kindly log in tomorrow also. We will continue to be doing whatever little service we can do as the Mentor Institute and towards taking learning from best known people to each one of you. That is what we take as our responsibility, and that is perhaps in accordance with the thoughts today given by Professor Jagdish Sheth. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very, very much for being with us. We are extremely grateful, and please support us and guide us in the coming days. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you so very much.
Bye.